Okay, what's up, guys? So, if you know what Conquest of Azeroth is, you know what this video is gonna be about. We are gonna breaking down the Starcaller class and give some of the major feedback, its gameplay loops, and its most major problems. This is my Starcaller main, which I've been playing for about 3 months, almost non-stop. It's pretty much the only class that I play besides Cultist, which I picked up recently, but that's beside the point. This is my favorite class from a lore standpoint. Its setup and the general theme of the class and how it plays I enjoy, but it has some immense flaws within its general gameplay loop, and some of its talents or synergies are very much lacking. So, first of all, I'm going to explain to you how the general class works. So, Starcaller is quite unique amongst the Conquest of Azeroth classes because it uses mana in direct conversion to damage. As for instance, Star Thunder uses 25% of your mana and converts it to damage. Specifically, all of the Starcaller spells do arcane damage if they do any type of magic damage. The class revolves around spending mana by percentages through Star Thunder or other similar spells like Hunter's Shot, Moonblade, or Starfire Shot, which the latter two use all of your mana instead of 25%. Your partial mana spenders create mana charges, which make your full mana spenders conserve some of the full mana. It's kind of complicated to say this, but it's very simple in use. If you use 3 of them, your full mana spender gets its full effect without spending all of it, only 70% of it. Besides that, use Celestial Strike in melee or Moonbow in ranged to generate your mana back up. It's based on percentage missing mana. Actually, it's been changed, sorry. It's max mana now. And they also generate so-called scattered stars, which reduce target's resistances and get consumed by Star Thunder to call down a star which does damage, scaling its spell power, obviously, and arcane spell power. Scattered stars and Star Thunder are basically the backbone, or its variations are basically the backbone of the class. My current build, which is partially Astral Warfare and Tides for the stun, revolves purely around scattered stars. You build up scattered stars through doing damage with celestial strikes and receiving damage through celestial armor to then consume them, which reduces the cooldown of your lunar shock. For this build, Moonstone talent, which increases the reduction of lunar shock through scatter star procs. This is very essential for this build. It's basically the only thing that makes this spec work at all. The class has been heavily nerfed from many different standpoints. The first nerf was to Starfire Shot, which consumed all mana, and in conjunction with other talents and spells, it basically 2-shot, which was deemed as quite problematic. I would agree. The other one was Drawstring of Elune, or so-called Machine Gun, where you increase your attack speed and relied on Scattered Stars procs to consume them for a massive amount of burst, which I did not deem as unbalanced because the spec has baseline dead zone in ranged and has no CC and also no escape. Okay, so now we'll get to baseline synergies of talents. Scattered Stars obviously is not intended to be a talent. This shouldn't even exist. Moon Tap is essential for PvP, but if you want to PvE as Astral Warfare, you have no choice because you are not going to use Aspect of Star-Lord. Aspect of Star-Lord, which brings us to the strength variation of Starcaller. The problem with this variation is that all of your gameplay revolves around spamming Celestial Strike because it does 75% of your weapon damage, which is the most of all of your spells. And your attack power to spell power conversion through Way of the Goddess is not enough to support any other uses of spells efficiently. Which basically makes the spec pretty much a one-button class. Its biggest problem for strength is really just the gameplay loop. It's a 1 to 2 spell spec. The only way I see this being fixed without changing class major in a major way is making Vengeance of Elune baseline and making Celestial Knight also baseline, or move it way down, because this wouldn't hurt the spell power variation which I'm running right now, since Vengeance of Elune purely scales with intellect and attack power, no spell power. Next row, Rain of Comets is basically, again, the only choice that is viable here for PvP. It calls down Rain of Comets like so. It does AoE damage. It's good for revealing stealth units. Does some AoE damage. Scales intellect spell power. Obviously, will pretty much never be picked as strength. Blanket of Stars is a tanking cooldown, but it can be used in PvP also because it provides 15% damage reduction from all sources, which can be useful, but we already have better defensive cooldowns to use for PvP, so it's never going to be picked really. Moonblade, this is a huge problematic spell in my opinion. Currently, I have done a lot of testing on this spell. It's supposed to consume all of your mana and reduce enemies' armor and magic resist. This is only picked in PvE, and it's not even for the damage, it's for the armor and magic resistance reduction, which benefits other classes. For a 20-second cooldown and consuming all of your mana, it is not worth using. Within your whole mana pool, it does around 1.3k damage on 20-second cooldown, uses all of your mana. In your full mana pool, you can use enough Star Sunders, which obviously proc your Scattered Stars and are way more flexible, do around 4.6k damage. On a long-term fight in PvE, it's pretty much never worth using for damage. On PvP, it is also not worth using because it consumes all of your mana if you have not set up mana charges. The damage is very much not competitive because it also removes flexibility from using other spells which require mana, which would give you like GCD downtime between building enough mana to use something else. Next, Moonstone, I have talked about. This is absolutely essential, and I think this should be pretty much baseline. I wouldn't see a problem with that. Reverse Magic is a super good defensive, but you cannot afford to pick it. You just cannot afford to. You don't have enough essences currently at level 50, obviously. I'm not talking about 60, and I will only mention some of the top rows. Vengeance of Elune I've talked about. I think the spell is completely fine on its own, but it needs to be baseline or somehow incorporated to appear instead of some other spell when you are in, Aspect of Star-Lord or something similar. Moonsteel Weapons, this is a very simple passive that procs arcane damage on 1.5 second GCD, well, internal CD. This is why Flurry Axe is pretty okay, because the speed is 1.5 obviously, and has a chance to proc Aspect of Stars, which for melee is the only viable aspect. For that reason, I think Aspect of the Star-Lord should also be baseline, but for Astral Warfare. Since if we are going with Cataclysm type talents rework. Star-Lord's Mandate, 15% increase Celestial Strike. This is basically only picked by the strength variation of the spec because it's their only spell that they use. It's an absolute no-brainer. Because of a lack of the amount of talents, they cannot go for anything else out of these. Celestial Armor is the PvP talent that I always go for because the Scare Stars generation is supporting all of the damage output through Lunar Shock and Tidal Lash in combination. They are bound to one key. This obviously procs from any type of damage, from range damage, so you can have your target basically prepped even before you get to them, which is quite hard to be honest. Warden's Blade. This spell is actually just dog shit. Never pick this. It's not worth for damage. 15% damage reduction for 8 seconds would be worth if you didn't have to swap to Aspect of the Moonguard and use GCD for it and use GCD for this. Mana regeneration of it through Cosmos, not worth it. You just use one Celestial Strike, does the same job. This also costs more energy than Celestial Strike. Through Star-Lord, 75% weapon damage is alright, but in a drawn-out fight or PvE DPS, it's incomparable to Star-Lord's Mandate because of 20-second cooldown. Mooncharge Shield. I mean, this is only active if you have a shield on. I don't see a problem with this being baseline completely. I don't think it's a... Like, for tanking, it's absolute no-brainer. You will try to get this no matter what. Starry Night. Basically the reverse of Celestial Armor. Celestial Armor provides Scare Stars through being hit. This one provides Scare Stars more by hitting. This could be... It's decent, but it's not comparable. And since we are limited on ability essences, and I do need the defensive from Moonguard, I will never pick this. Going back to Scared Stars, since we are on the topic, Scared Stars, its consumption is only really worth it on the spell power variation of the class in any spec. Because it calls down stars, which scale with spell power. That's pretty obvious. And each star per stack that is built, if we can manage to build any of them. Yeah, imagine that I have 6 of them stacked up, yeah? All of them would be consumed, and each of them will consume a star. And by having Celestial Armor, you have potential 6 stacks, which get consumed at once. Those 6 stars, each of the stars has a chance to proc an Astral Flare through Aspect of Stars. That's what makes the whole thing work. It works off of itself. The general gameplay loop is if you are being attacked from range, they already have Scared Start procs. You usually lead with Tight Call and Lunar Strike along with Tidal Lash, which through Tight Call it stuns. It's a double dot on 40 plus yard range. Then you obviously already have some Scare Stars. If not, you try to get some. You consume them through Star Sunder to reset the cooldown of your Lunar Shock. Use it as soon as possible. Then you're basically spamming Star Sunder until you're around 50% mana. And then you weave Celestial Strikes in between and alternate however much you need. The whole build basically revolves around Lunar Shock and Scared Stars. Back to the talents. Starlight Duelist is good for tanking, but I don't think this really needs any changes, and it's not really relevant to talk about Halt. It should completely be baseline because it's an interrupt, and our interrupt currently is Command, which is weird because it forces targets to move, but some targets can heal while moving, so it doesn't really do anything. It's clunky to use, really weird. Aspect of the Cosmos, it provides a slow, but the value that's from Aspect of Stars is infinitely more, and this will pretty much never be used, unfortunately. Even though it makes Celestial Strike cost less energy, at least 20% reduced damage, and since that's the only spell that Strength Variation uses, it's also worthless. This should completely be reworked or deleted. Astral Blade, I don't understand why this exists. This should just not exist, also. There's not much explanation. I mean, the numbers just don't work out. It's not worth having two partial mana consumptions. Aspect of the Moon. This one could work for the strength variation, technically, but you don't have enough healing or spell power to actually make a good use of it. So unfortunately, in my opinion, it should be moved to Moonbow. So actually Starcaller can be used in other spells. Moonguard is full mana consumption spell, which converts mana to shielding. Currently it's a huge value, but it's not broken because our only offensive mobility is a 40% speed up, which, as you know, speed ups are easily countered by simple slows, and slows are usually ranged, or in a lot of time they are. So you're using it just to get on targets if you don't have a slow up or if you're on DR. Sundering Blade. This style needs a rework by increasing the window which you can reapply Star Sunders to at least 2.3 seconds, if not 3 seconds. Because this would force you to just spamming Star Sunder, which just doesn't make any sense. You go from only spamming Celestial Strike to only spamming Star Sunder. It's very boring and uninteresting gameplay loop, and increasing it to 3 seconds or 2.3 seconds to fit in one GCD in between. So you Star Sunder, Celestial Strike, Star Sunder makes the rotation a bit more interesting, even though it's two spells. Please consider this. It will not be OP, I promise. This is not a meme. Like, I actually promise it will not be OP. Because by only alternating between these two, you're giving up all of your defensives and utility. So you either do damage or live. It's completely fine compared to other classes. Cosmic Vengeance. Can't really say much about this in PvP because you just don't parry much. You have no way to proc Vengeance of Elune. In PvE it's okay, but currently we don't have enough points to get to this row where you would need more of them. You need Guided Reflexes and also this if you want to make use of Vengeance of Elune. So, kind of a dead talent too. I think Vengeance of Elune should baseline consume stars, because I don't see why not. Cosmic Whetstone. This is okay, but I think it should be on a lower cooldown. Again, because of lack of ability essences, this is a non-option. It will never be run. Guided Reflexes, this is either melee defensive or just tanking cooldown. This is probably the strongest tanking cooldown in the game compared to CD, 1 minute. It's basically 100% immunity to melee. Perfect spell. I see absolutely no problem with this. More of this, please. Vengeful Combat. This is also a tanking talent, basically, which makes you being healed, as obviously the tank, make you use Vengeance of Elune more. Speaking of which, since Vengeance of Elune can only be used after dodging or parrying or through healing, I think it should have slightly lower CD, maybe 3 seconds. I don't see like a huge problem with that. Moonhammer is only used for its utility. I have no problem with this spell. but it's way too high up in the tree to actually like be a huge consideration, right? Because you just go for it. If you're strength, you need CC, because you are not going into Tidal Lash, because all of this damage is wasted. You have no scaling for it. Of the top row, I will only mention two. This one, Celestial Knight, which makes Vengeance of the Alone being able to proc from periodic damage. This being here instead of Vengeance of the Alone, and this being baseline, would make the strength variation viable. Just this one change, boom, fixed completely. You have 3 spells which you can rotate after that, absolutely no problem. Besides that, Star-Lord. This one is completely tied to Moonblade being completely useless. It is pointless to try to reset the cooldown of Moonblade, because Moonblade consumes all of your mana. If you get a random reset, you will have to wait for the mana to be full for it to be useful at all. This is completely useless. It should not exist. Resetting something that already has the preset that you need full mana for it to be useful, the logic just strikes against itself. Besides that, I don't really see much of a problem here. We will see about Warrior of Lone. The other talents look completely fine. I'll go through Tides real quick, because this is a healing spec and Starcaller is an AoE healer, and I don't see huge problems with it. The only one I want to talk about is Swell. This spell sucks. Yep, it just sucks. It's a stacking healing over time, but even at 3 stacks, it heals less than Frog Venom of Witch Doctor. And the Witch Doctor doesn't even have to be running healing. He can be running spell power, the damage variation. Just buff this. Just baseline or scaling, anything, just buff it, please. Rest of it is completely fine, in my opinion. Obviously, ideally, Tidal Lash would be 1 row down and Slipstream would be 1 more up. Like, switch these. That would be ideal for flexibility. And Aspect of the Sea, which should be baseline for the Tide spec. Or Moonbow. One of them. So you don't, or actually just both of them. Besides that, I think it's fine. And now the most problematic spec that I can think of, of the all classes I've played. Okay, besides Tactics Barbarian. Okay, we're not going to talk about that one. This has been so nerfed. And it has absolutely no identity, and its gameplay is dog shit. I will have to go from base all the way up to explain where the problems are. Moon Arrow is your baseline range spell, right? It scales with attack power. And most of Starcaller is scaling through spell power. So this will be completely useless until way, way, way late into the game, like Nax gear. And even then, it might be outperformed by spell power. This is generally only used for little tick damage while you're chasing somebody, or for restoring a bit of mana. Prayer of Alone. I don't understand why this is in Moonbow. It should be in the healing spec. I guess because it's Moon and it's Alone. Okay. But really, just make Tidal Lash into an arcane spell and put it here, and put Prayer of Alone here. Very simple change, fixes a lot of shit. Yeah. Hunter's Shot. This is the ranged equivalent of Star Sunder. Works exactly the same. It's just on a range. It's a good spell. It's the only good spell. that they have, unfortunately. Astral Flare. This should not be a talent in my opinion in this state, because 2-second cast time for the damage it does, which is 370 on 480 spell power, it's just not worth using, because Huntress Shot does around 430. It's instant. Obviously, Astral Flare has to exist somewhere in the coding to be used by Aspect of the Stars. But I don't think this is the way. Astral Armor, it's a defensive, no problem with this. 3-minute cooldown is kinda justified because it also silences and does damage and damage reduction. It's a strong spell. It honestly could be just higher up in the tree. Cosmic Presence, this is the only good passive this whole thing has. This thing, if it was in Astral Warfare, which I think would make sense because it's Cosmic Presence, Astral Warfare, and it's melee, this should not be... Rain of Comets and Cosmic Presence should swap. That's the only change, because it scales with attack power on the defensive part and scales with spell power on the offensive part. Did I say it correctly? Well, whatever. You get what I mean. Replenishment is good, needs to be combined with replenishing arrows, and replenishing arrows should be removed. By the way, I'm not going to suggest any additional spells. I'm just going to say which ones should be combined or moved or changed. The duration increasing part of replenishing arrows should be baseline of replenishment. These should be just combined. Otherwise, it's never worth picking, pretty much. Because its utility is, let's say, negligible. Astral Quickness, it's okay, but it's kind of a bait if you're running out of ability essence. The increased chance is not that huge. It only works with a combination with other attack speed increasing spells. Aspect of the Huntress, this is completely fine. I think the crit chance conversion can be higher, and it can be baseline. Arcing Comet, which is basically a disengage, should be baseline for Moonbow because it has dead range and it has no CC. The only CC that they have is a delayed route that is also locked to an area. It basically works exactly like Rain of Comets, but it's just a small circle of a beam. If you stand in it, you root it. Unusable in PvP pretty much, because who will not move in 4 seconds? They will have to not be paying attention at all. Alignment, no problem with this spell. It's just regenerating your mana. It's usually used with Rune Renewal, basically the healer type of Moonbow. Good synergy between these two spells, or these three, and so on. No problem with this. Lunar Focus. Lunar Focus basically works only because of Astral Arrows and Drawstring of Loon. This is never a standalone pick and never will be. Pure attack speed increase is not really worth for Starcaller because of the type of weapons they run and the internal cooldowns they have. Cosmic Guise. It's a very good spell, very strong. It puts you around 200 resistance, I think, or 140 resistance, which should be like 15% magic damage reduction or so on. 20-second cooldown, super strong. The only problem is that if you are going the DPS spec, which Moonbow honestly should be, or a healer spec, you cannot afford to pick it. Lunar Renewal is just a full heal. This is the main spell that synergizes with mana charges in the best way. Stellar Drift is your only self-heal, I guess, without Star Shatter. But Star Shadow is 2-minute cooldown. It's a 2.5 second stun, which can obviously be trinketed, and is very low range. So this is your only other option. But unfortunately, due to the way ability essences work, you cannot pick it over Starfire Shot or Astral Arrowheads. Starfire Shot has been insanely nerfed. Now it's just barely worth picking, to be honest. Unfortunate. I think the scaling just needs to be worked on more. I have no problem with how the spell itself works. Just damage has to be better tuned, or give it a cast time and higher damage. Because it already has a cooldown and consumes all of your mana. Astral Arrowheads. So this is what made the machine gun build strong. Because it applies scattered stars on every hit. Through Drawstring and Lunar Focus, previously you went over 350 increased ranged attack speed, which would generate insane amount of scattered stars through Astral Arrowheads. It's on 1 minute cooldown. So basically you would just be, imagine this is Hunter's Arrow or whatever, you would just be spamming it because every attack, every auto attack would be building a scattered star, and every Hunter's Arrow would be consuming it. So you'd be constantly generating stars, regenerating some mana through them, and so on. Huge damage. With that build, you had absolutely no defensives because you couldn't reach that far into the tree without giving up something else. And yeah, it unfortunately got nerfed. I don't think it was necessary. Sorry. And yeah, should be looked at. Lunar Channeling. Honestly, I have no clue why even Moonbow can heal. It's kind of weird. If so, this just should replace Astral Flare. They should just swap. So you actually have like a kind of a healing build option to go through and not choose within one row, which is weird. Cosmic Duality makes the healing build into a hybrid with Starfire Shot, so you kind of have damage and healing, and they synergistically would work off of each other. No problem with this. It's a good passive. Starcall, 2.5 second cooldown. Yes, it's AoE. Yes, it's uncapped, but it just doesn't do enough damage compared to other classes. In PvP, is completely unjustified. Yeah, we'll see how it works out on higher gear, but I don't think its scaling is actually good enough because Cosmic Presence, just standing there, does more damage. Easily. And you can use GCDs on other things. Cosmic Shift, okay, so this one is like a change in my opinion, because forcing somebody into invisibility without any voice communication or any kind of communication, it just sucks because it breaks their target, targeting, because they phase out of the current, world or whatever, how you want to call it, into the invisibility, or like they phase shift. So it fucks them up on that part, and it also fucks you up because you're using ability essence to do this. It might get wasted. The movement speed does not persist through it breaking in some way or being cancelled. Right now it's just unfortunately a waste. If you are on comms, it can be okay to give them like chance to run away, but other than that, not really. Replacing arrows, I've talked about that. Moon Priest, if Prayer of Alone is to be moved into Tides, this should also move into Tides or become baseline for Tides. Since Moon Arrow is going to be used anyway because of Aspect of Star Witch. Pretty obvious change, I think. Celestial Alignment. Honestly, this is just an inferior. This is just the same thing as Alignment. I don't see a reason to having them both. like obviously it's because of lunar renewal that you are alternating between these, but it's kind of unhealthy gameplay, I would say, because lunar renewal heals for 2.7k on current mana, and it will only get stronger with gear. Because, yeah, the healing just scales up insanely fast. Priest of Elune, not tested, can't really say anything about its design. I think its design is okay. Its spell haste might make Starcall usable, but then again, you need to pick both of them to make the thing work. I don't know if that's a good design or not. Well, yeah. Constellation. This is a weird one because it only would work on Astral arrowheads if you're going Moonbow. Otherwise, it will be a perfect thing to have in Astral Warfare because you're able to apply scattered stars to all of your attackers. I think it's fine in its design, but might be misplaced in the trees. Deadeye. We'll have to see how Starfire is dealt with. So generally, those are all of the main problems with Starcaller. First of all, they have no CC if you don't talent into it. Even then, it's conditional to you having 4 title focus stacks, using Tightcall, which is, it's just a weird thing that you can't use during the cast of Moonwell Splash. So it's kind of awkward to use. As a DPS, you will always pretty much use it for Tide Lash because of the stun. It's the only way you can catch up to targets or interrupt them, because you don't have an interrupt really. My interrupt is Shadow Melding, which is just dumb. Morphile Blessing is completely fine. Star Shadow should have a longer range. Besides that, I think the melee spell power version of the class plays well. I like it. The other versions of its gameplay are severely lacking, I think, due to nerfs or inconsistency in design or just holes in design. Its healing on AoE is absolutely busted. Some people have 6 million overhealing. That is a bit too much, because that will force you to having to scale the boss's output damage insanely high. Otherwise it will be just too easy and nobody will ever die unless they get one shot, which is also just not fun at all. I think the torrent, slipstream interaction and so on will have to be looked at in some point. Obviously, if their niche is being the AoE healer, okay, but I think even then it's overtuned, because Starcaller uses absolutely no mana, because they can regen mana at any point of time. That's basically all I wanted to say about the class currently, or that I could think of. Many people suggest different things for the class, but I think I consolidated most of the worries, problems, and gaps in the design for there to actually be something done about it. I don't think the class needs huge changes. It's pretty obvious small gaps that just need to be filled or shuffled. The class itself is very fun. I like it. And yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions about this class or its DPS variation, you can just ask me in the Conquest of Azeroth Discord. I go under the same name as my character is, and I'm online every day. Oh yeah, and I also stream the BGs, so if you want to hang out, sure. Peace.